fast evolving technologies gives the opportunity to create and drive new business models. You can make a difference as a small company. You also can be a valuable part.
The startup has to focus first of all on the core product and to develop that in an ecosystem mode.
It helps to start with a strategy first. We're talking about synergies, especially the Climate 21 solution, and everything we're doing around decreasing the CO2 footprint is something that only works in a healthy ecosystem.
Welcome to the Voices of Ecosystems.
Welcome to the Voices of Ecosystem podcast, second edition. And today I'm really happy to have a very special and interesting guest, Deepa Gautam-Nigge. And she's really predestinated to be part of this Voices of Ecosystem podcast, mainly due to two reasons. First of all, she has a lot of experiences in the context of ecosystems. You will see that in a minute, from diverse perspectives. And secondly, she's actually a voice by herself, because she's often in the media, at least in the German media, but also in the international media, to this topic of ecosystems. So it's really a good fit to have her today in this podcast, in this vlog. So very warm welcome, Deepa. Looking forward to have you here.
Thank you, Julian, for inviting. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, and not too many words before. I think we can directly stick into the topic. I think you can introduce yourself. Maybe just I give you just one or two words, and then you can go and move with that. I think you have a broad experience. Like in our pre-talk, I learned that you actually moved many times. You lived in many places. You have a lot of experiences made in your life in personal ecosystems, but also in business ecosystems. And now, currently, you're responsible for a big software player, SAP, for the Next-Gen network to connect startups and corporates for business ecosystem purposes. So also 100% fit to our topic. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that and also a little bit on your background more than I did that. So please feel free.
Yeah. Thank you. Love to do that. Yeah, I'm Deepa from SAP, and I'm globally heading the so-called SAP Next-Gen Ecosystem. And what is the SAP Next-Gen Ecosystem about is more or less, you can hear in the name itself, it's all about next generations. And that includes next generations users and decision makers working with SAP software, but also the next generation entrepreneurs that we just connect from various angles to our either product management, our customers, or include into our portfolio. And it's also the next generation of employees that we're just addressing. And I'm heading all the partnerships that are related to these activities. And as a background, 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to start in a startup on my own. So I was employee number one, not the founder, but employee number one. And we just established as a spin-off out of RWTH Aachen, where I studied. We established one of the first B2B platform business models in the German market. So it's interesting, that's 20 years ago, actually. And neither the word digitization or platform economy were existing in this sense, or in this broader sense, in the market already. But this is, the time when I just started really to engage in business ecosystems, or actually building up my first business ecosystem in the context of the startup.
So we were already in ecosystems before everybody was talking about ecosystems. That is really interesting. What do you remember when this ecosystem thing was then for you also in your context in a broader sense, in terms of that everybody was talking about it? Is it like 5 years ago? Is it 10 years ago? Do we have maybe some incident where, okay, it pops up now that's a topic, or now I grasp it? Is there anything like this?
I remember that having it, having seen it in a broader sense of scaling business and business models, etc. I think I read something about it in a McKinsey study, and then I also personally formulated my mission statement for my role within SAP is really driving innovation in the era of ecosystems. Because in this McKinsey study, there were different angles what you need to drive in the digitized world, driving new business models and business opportunities, and the aspect of the ecosystem and the importance of the ecosystem was one of those main pillars that were outlined there. I think that was the first time I really had it expressed in a phrase, but naturally, as I said, I'm working in this sense ever since.
Cool. And that's why we want to talk about that and about your experiences. And actually, we would like to split our discussion into three main topics. First of all, we would like to talk about B2B ecosystems, because that's kind of your background, and we will learn about that also in a minute. And then we would like to talk about ecosystems in the software industry, which is your current role. And then we would like to move forward about the role of startups, which is also your current role. So we have this kind of double role within business ecosystems. And at the end, we will move forward to think about maybe you have some advices, best practices. So maybe we start in with a B2B ecosystem thing, because of course, everybody, at least in the broad audience, knows the big ecosystem giants, the GAFAMs, etc., and their activities. So that's mainly consumer driven, but not exclusively. If we take Amazon with AWS, you have the mixture. This is also kind of what we see in our research, this kind of converging of B2B and B2C. But now let's stick with B2B. And the question is, why is B2B in terms of like recognition in the public so behind the B2C ecosystems? Is there do you see there several or one main reason? Or is it maybe not the case that it's just that we see it or I see it? How do you see that?
I think there are many answers to that question. So, but just going a little bit back is kind of really looking at ecosystem itself. So, what is an ecosystem? It's a diverse network of different various players that somehow interact, interlink, and are symbiotic relationships, actually. So that's in a broader sense, and I think that's either you look at B2B or B2C. It's kind of it's the same structure to look into it, and of course the evolvement of B2C ecosystems is quite quicker as you reach out to individuals. It's a broader, it's a mass movement, so to say, if you're just related to GAFAM, but not, that's kind of, also in B2C as a B2B ecosystem, but GAFAM is you reach out to many individuals that really decide, and you have you have fast login effects and network effects that immediately kick in. So this is why we all have them present in our minds, and they really scale really fast. Building up a business ecosystem where you have also the same network effects and metrics is a kind of a more complex thing. But on the other hand, if you just look at SAP, for instance, SAP is one of, as I always say, Germany's oldest startup, is created in a large ecosystem by itself, actually. So not only being Europe's largest software vendor, we also created, or SAP also created, a huge network of partners that implement SAP. There is a huge network of professors in academia that teach SAP. There is, of course, the majority of our customers using SAP, really doing also add-ons, building new business models on it. So it's kind of as a core, it's a facilitator to drive an ecosystem itself. And I think if you look at each and every company, also from a B2B perspective, they're also building ecosystems like our automotive industry, our established incumbent industry, we're just very proud of here in Germany, also created a supplier ecosystem. So also there, it's not that this topic is so new to us, but I think it's more complex to make it visible and scale it in a B2B sense rather than in a B2C sense.
It's true, supplier ecosystems we have maybe even since 10, 15, 20 years, even more. The question is, what is the difference between classical supply chain and ecosystem? When we define it in research, more that you have kind of a cooperation of equals in the supply chain. It's very hierarchical. It's changing maybe sometimes, but or it's changing due to Industrial 4.0 and IoT, etc. But still, in many supply chains, it's I wouldn't actually talk.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, agree when we look where it comes from. But I think due to the convergence of industries, there's really seeing automotive manufacturers becoming software manufacturers, like Tesla, like Volkswagen just started. Seeing these in many other areas as well, I think it really the convergence of these topics really leads to also kind of disrupt these traditional hierarchies in the supply chain that you just mentioned. And I think it's also the nature of platform business models is really breaking up the classical supply chain. So rather than being organized in a network with symbiotic structures.
Now we are talking about the German automotive industry, where we are very proud of. True. The question is, which other domains do you see also once again in the B2B setting, where you see evolving ecosystems or at least ecosystem activities? Are there any like 1, 2, 3 other? I don't call it industries. We call it domains, because I think that's maybe the better name. But do you see other domains where this is evolving in B2B apart from automotive?
Yeah, part of I think I see it in many areas, but in different maturity levels. But it's something that we see as also in terms of getting crowd intelligence and innovation out of a crowd into the incumbent world. I think the maturity levels are quite different, but I see where I see a very strong movement is actually in the project area.
Okay.
Currently, of course, in the IoT area, there is also the necessity of really connecting that, and I think there is still a long way where we see so many innovations also over the next years. Yeah, that would be. We see some movements in the media industry, for sure, right now. But actually, as I said, I think we see it in every industry or in every domain, but the maturity levels are kind of different.
So I totally agree with that. I just wanted to know where you see maybe 1 or 2 or 3 main domains which we can actually pin out. And I see that we had, maybe just for information, in our last vlog, I had this conversation with Dennis Krechting, also from RWTH Aachen, which is also one of my co-author for this ecosystemizer concept. And he's now building a company for smart city and urban living.
Yeah.
And of course, we were also talking a lot about the prop tech thing, which is very interesting because there's a lot of activities. That was the lessons learned from there, but still not yet so many dominant players or concrete action. So it's more on a test and learn and a huge potential identification level rather than we can also have the huge ecosystem success cases. And the question is there anything? I mean, we once again in the B2C we think about the big tech players, in whether they are in US or China. Do we have some examples for industry players where you say, okay, they are very far in terms of ecosystem evolvement? I think in Germany we always have maybe Siemens with MindSphere and their platform in mind, but Is that the case, or do you have others which you have?
Oh, there are several, of course. We at SAP, of course, run these activities anyway. So
we come to that later in a minute.
And but also I see you mentioned Siemens was very active in that. Wira, the accelerator arm of Telefonica, very successful, also acting throughout Europe. We see also Airbus as a pan-European company is also really driving heavily innovation like that. Then we see at also our incumbent insurance industry, all the activities around Allianz X are very interesting to follow. And they're also relying not on a very diverse and very interesting model on how to build up innovation ecosystem.
And now, okay, that were great to get some examples. Now we come to the software industry and of course to SAP. So what do you think? What are the secrets, or maybe also the main levers for ecosystems in the software industry? What does it differentiate it to maybe others, or are they the same logics? So maybe you can get us an idea about that. What is software and ecosystems? What is the key?
Yeah. I think, as I said, you see the evolvement of ecosystems on different maturity levels if you look at the different industries or domains, like you call it. And I think what compared to incumbent industry, why is the software industry is very already very ahead of the curve ever since in terms of really ecosystem innovation, call it like that. And also really acting and working in the ecosystem, because technologies are changing so fast that you're not able to be capable of everything that you need to know, you need to build, whatever. So you need from early on to think in synergies and really build on robust partner structures. And I think it's the maturer the industry is, so the longer the industry is already had the chance to evolve and develop, the less mature the ecosystem is. Because in the past, if you were a car manufacturer 100 years ago, you owned more or less the whole value chain on your own, and then later, we talked about it, you build up in a supply chain, and the ecosystem more or less came out of an hierarchy. And the software business, you needed to be from day one, needed to be very open and flexible to really connect with market players, with customers, with partners, whoever, who really help you to scale and to drive your robust business. And I think that's the main difference that I see if I compare the software industry with the incumbent industry. I think in the software industry, also with this fast changing technologies and the global connections of individuals, and also all opportunities that the internet technology brought with it, you need to be more connected and need to focus more on relationships to really scale.
Okay, I got that. That's an interesting issue. The speed factor. Yeah? That's absolutely true. The question is now, when we see the current developments like Slack and Salesforce merger, or TikTok Oracle cooperation.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that there's a consolidation, or not consolidation, but it's kind of an extension of the offering portfolio in this B2B ecosystems, so that the customers of these companies, also your customers, are expecting that you offer more integrated services, and then these companies are trying to cooperate or extending their ecosystems with M&A activities. So is that the case? What is the reason behind these activities, and where will that go? What is your perspective on the future about that?
Yeah, I think when we also look on it, how really technology evolves on one hand, and also fast evolving technologies gives the opportunity to really drive and create and drive new business models and new ideas. So the bunch of opportunities that are out there now are quite high. And I think it's kind of, in the past, we always see consolidation and M&A activities, of course. Yeah, either you grow organically, or you need to, you complement your standard business with something, to gain market shares. But what I see is also that, as you mentioned, the TikTok example, or for instance, the example that comes across my mind is really the LinkedIn acquisition by Microsoft some years ago, which is so interesting because it was, at the first glance, for many of us, it was not obvious why they did that. Because what do a business network, a more or less consumer focused, or so kind of end user focused, put it this way, why does a software provider like Microsoft acquires LinkedIn? But having in mind that they can have a strong CRM solution in their portfolio, and having a database of individuals on the other hand, what kind of possibilities there might be to drive a very targeted business models for agencies, for whatever reason, where you just relate to your CRM solution with kind of living self-updating data. So it's kind of, I think the fantasy is not large enough to imagine what potential is there. And I think this is the interesting part, what we see in the M&A activities, or what I see in the M&A activities in the software business related to the examples that you mentioned, is really there is the chance for complete new business models beyond the obvious. And it's kind of, and there is the fast evolving technologies are really building the ground for these things.
I see it absolutely in the same way, and I also, this LinkedIn Microsoft acquisition, I think that was really one of the smartest acquisitions in history across industries, I think, at least in the last 10, 20 years, I think, with the potential they can gain with that. And
but also to stick also to my roots, also with the Concur or Qualtrics acquisition that SAP was driving, it's following the same pattern, really. True. To say, coming from a pure B2B business oriented software, but also including customer feedback, incorporate that into our B2B solutions. And I think also there, that was nothing that is obvious that could be an interesting fit, but it totally makes sense to align these worlds. As I said, that industries are converging, but also use cases are converging, and the lines are blurring between B2B and B2C in this sense.
Absolutely, I agree. Maybe one ultimate question to SAP, because I found that interesting when I was last year. It was actually one of the last events in face-to-face in several events around the Davos World Economic Forum meeting, and I met your board member Thomas Saueressig when he was presenting the Climate 21 initiative, where, as I understood, you plan together with partners, with the UN, with Accenture, with others, to make the CO2 footprint transparent with your software solutions in order to solve, or to at least contribute to decrease the level of CO2 in our world. So maybe you can comment on that a little bit. How far is that ecosystem? Is it really an ecosystem? It was presented as one.
It absolutely is, because and I think that's the best example that really elaborates, because CO2 footprint is also something life affecting, and it only works, and that is also kind of in the nature of ecosystem. It only works if the different elements are in a relationship, and a symbiotic relationship with each other, and really have synergies, and it really only works in a system as a whole. And this is why it makes perfectly sense to drive something like that, and really incorporate this into the value chain, because also CO2 footprint is not only about canceling my flights and being more sensitive on means of transportation on one hand, but it's also kind of really how are the goods that produce that I consume. So you really need to integrate that in all, and it's and especially the Climate 21 solution and everything we're doing around decreasing the CO2 footprint is something that only works in a healthy ecosystem.
Cool. So looking forward to get more or to experience more in the next few years, because I think that's our topic, the topic of our generations. You have children, I have children, so for them, I think that's really so important. But not to be too pathetic. Maybe we come to our third and ultimate topic for today. Now, the role of startups, where you are also very experienced. You mentioned that as a founder 20 years ago, but also today with many founding activities and many connections to founders. So we were talking now a lot about the big giants being part of or pushing, shaping ecosystems. So is there any chance also for small or for startups, even for big startups, to play an active or a dominant role, or at least an important role in ecosystems?
They are essential in ecosystem as well. As we talk, if you take an ecosystem by definition, it's a kind of a network of diverse actors, and of course there are big ones and there are small ones, and I think it's also crucial to really see, and this is also comes along with the evolvement of technology, that we see so much movement in terms of innovation out of ecosystems and out of the crowd. As I always say, the innovation out of the crowd is really something that you need to really systematically, as a large corporation, need to get hold on, to really also evolve your business. And I think it's very important for the big ones to relate to the small ones, to the startups, and vice versa, and learn from each other, complement each other. And also something that's interesting to see from my own experience, when we started, and I was not the founder, I was employee number one. That's a difference.
True.
But the founders' credits are at the other side. But what I saw is really you can make a difference as a small company if you have a good idea and you find your niche and your solution that solves a specific problem. Then you also can be a valuable part of a bigger whole. Also from a corporate perspective, even if you need to, on both sides you need to learn each other's language and try to adapt on processes and try to, it's kind of a cultural, there are some cultural differences you need to keep in mind and need to work with, but it's a very, very important role that startups can play there.
I learned, or actually also I read that in many startup books, that as a startup entrepreneur, the main important issue is focus. So don't distract with too many other things. Ecosystems and ecosystem building is getting the dots together and communicating, networking, waiting for answers. So when is the right time for startups to start with this ecosystem things and to start to partner? Not at the beginning probably, but is there a right time? Is there a right moment?
Well, I would disagree, actually. I would not put it this way in this sequence, because an ecosystem, you start with ecosystem building actually from day one. It's a natural thing and a natural thing. And I think even the startup will look even more for synergies and partners and how to scale in a very effective and efficient way, rather than a large corporation needs to in terms of resources. So it's really kind of but you need to be, and that applies either for the big one or for the small one. You need to know where you want to head and for what kind of solution, go-to-market metric, whatever topic I look at, for what do I need, which partner and which kind of ecosystem component. And because even we as a startup 20 years ago, and this as a company still exists, want to mention.
What's the name of the company?
That's Trovarit AG. The IT, they're driving the IT matchmaker.
Okay.
The platform is the IT matchmaker. Yeah, founded in 1999. So, And no, it was what I wanted to say is really that you really start from day one and really looking into synergies and really be an essential part of your ecosystem. So being aware of what your role is and what your goal is, then it's kind of really natural that there is a natural synergy that comes to your mind. So this is nothing where you say, is it something where you lose focus? Of course, you need to create your vision, you need to create your product, but once the latest point when you start off thinking how to scale and go into the market, you need to have an ecosystem strategy at least in your back head already.
I think there is no contradiction between both of us, because I think as you described it, I totally agree. I was more thinking on a strategic portfolio perspective, meaning ecosystems as a lever to extend your portfolio with partners. And there, I think the startup has to focus first of all on the core product and to develop that in an ecosystem mode. But in terms of, as Microsoft did with LinkedIn, as you do, yeah, in the CO2 settings, you need different partners for a different business unit or business purpose. That is what a startup cannot do, because it has to focus on, first of the beginning at least, on its core activities, core products, yeah, but with ecosystem partners. And I think that's maybe where we come together back again. So I don't see the contradiction actually.
Yeah, because I don't think you build up an ecosystem for the sake of building an ecosystem. True. It's kind of something that really comes naturally along. But latest when you go out, of course, once the product is more or less said and done and you think about go to market, then at that latest point, you need to have an ecosystem. Call it ecosystem, but it could be also a partner strategy, whatever, because also an ecosystem can look differently from each and every angle, and for each and every use case, you also have a different type of ecosystem you create.
Okay, ultimate part, we come to the end. Maybe now we would like to know, of course, your advices for others, for managers, and now especially for corporate managers. We come back to that. When a corporate manager, a corporate CEO or CDO is thinking about to extend its business operations with partners to other areas, in terms of, you were mentioning blurring of industries, etc. So what is the most important thing? Is it more the strategy behind? Is it the setup? Is it the people? Is it the operations, the tools? Is it all of that? Can you rank that? What would you tell him how to start? So big question, I know, but maybe try to find an answer.
Yeah, I think, of course, it's all of us, all of that, what you just mentioned. And I think it helps to start with the strategy first, I would say, to really think of what kind of, what is the next step I want to reach in terms of go to market, in terms of scaling, in terms of implementing. It's kind of addressing customers requires a different part of the ecosystem than really driving to compare implementing software, for instance. So it's kind of, and it really depends on your strategy. What kind of partnerships do you need, and what kind of complementary skills do you need in terms of partners, of course, and then also to really have the business metrics behind, because we're talking about synergies. You need to think about the win-win situation for each and every party. So that is also, sometimes it sounds quite easy, but is not so easy, because many times I also learned that people think, oh, we should partner with X, Y, Z. And then you say, okay, but if I look at the business model, I don't know where the synergy could be. Yeah, so maybe look into that. So you need to be very clear on what you want to achieve, on which kind of partners will help you to achieve. And this is only, and selecting the right partner really depends on which kind of partners do you have a natural benefit, or a complementing business model that also benefits, where you have this symbiotic relationship and create one. And of course, you need to have people on board that are able to drive that. Also talking about platform business models, where I also say, coming from a software company, if you talk about platforms, many people have in mind that's the technology platform. that we're talking about. But a platform business model not only contains of technology, it's a technology as an enabler, as the underlying foundation that you actually need to build something like that. But then it comes the business model, and then of course you need the people, because it's also about a new collaboration model. And I think having all these dimensions in mind, you really need to orchestrate that.
Cool, that were very concrete tips. I think that is really helpful for the audience. And with that, I come to my last two questions. First of all, when we would have this kind of talk in 3 years,
okay.
What would be the major changes for the ecosystem topic? Is there any trends you see? What will be different? Are there more mergers, more blurring of industries, even more? Is it just that it goes stable further? So is there anything which will mainly change or will have changed in 3 years?
I think the importance of really thinking in ecosystems and driving activities in ecosystem will be more and more relevant. That's for sure. And as I mentioned, in some areas we really have huge disruptions that are critical. We see, as we just have in the current situation, we are facing during the COVID crisis, that was obvious, where also in the health ecosystem, how things need to kick in. We see this in the cybersecurity area with all the hacking attacks that we witnessed over the last weeks. I think there are many very critical, and also from a society standpoint, critical processes and areas where I think that the ecosystems will play a more and more important role.
Cool. And my closing question always is now we talked a lot about business ecosystems and business purposes. Now the question is, do you have also an ecosystem mindset in your private life or in a private context? Is there anything related to ecosystem thinking you can imagine?
Yeah, as you just said in the introduction, interestingly, because as I said, I just relate to that. My parents immigrated to Germany early 70s, and as somebody, they needed to build up an ecosystem for their own, really getting be linked and integrated in the society. So I'm a Nepalese Rhinelander. That's also kind of not a natural fit of ecosystems at the first glance. Also, as a matter of fact, I need to move frequently. So I changed frequently schools. And I think there I was always thrown into, every 3-4 years, I was thrown into a complete different ecosystem where I need to kind of connect the dots and walk myself through. And I think that's kind of that's kind of my personal ecosystem experience. Maybe this is also why it's for me so easy, also from a professional standpoint, to work with this ever-changing elements, and I'm not afraid of trying new things out in terms of, because I know that I can rely on a ecosystem always.
Cool. I think that's the best closing remark we can have. So once again, thank you so much, Deepa, for these very fruitful, very interesting, very concrete insights. And I think that will help a lot for the audience. I hope so, at least. And thank you so much once again for your time and for your insights. Thanks.
Thank you for the invitation, Julian.